again, the closest thing to the near-death experience where I saw faces flashing in front of me that I didn't recognize, but I knew. When I came from that, I knew, I knew that it was my ancestors and future souls helping me understand the merging of past, present, and future. The time isn't linear. What's up, everybody? This is Nadia Davis, and this is your superior self. Welcome.
Oh, beautiful. Very beautiful. Elegant. Nadia, I was just thinking, and we were just speaking about it, but you have had an interesting life thus far.
There's a quote from an actress that isn't necessarily like one of my favorites necessarily, that is, well, you can certainly say I haven't had a boring life. It was Elizabeth Taylor, and I remember reading that and saying, I have not had a boring life, and I'm very grateful to be where I'm at today, to be
Sure.
able to see that.
But to be able to say that, not only just say that, but write a book about that, right? Like someone who has had a life that has been in the public eye, and then to write about that and to write your story, speak to that, right? Like what is that? Is there any fear associated with that whatsoever?
Fears or shame?
Well, like fear, like, I mean, as far as letting yourself out there, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it shame, but just kind of like a realization that, hey, some people are going to see some stuff about my story.
There was initially, with the fact that they chose my photo on the cover, and now having built, a private life as best I can, it a little bit, but my life was all out there and already, and it was the way that it was told, it was the way it was interpreted, it was just, this was the behavior, this was the act, and there was no coverage or no even inquiry into what is really going on with this person. And
Mhm.
so, I knew that by sharing my story, that it was an act of banning shame and shaming. That, here you go. This is the act of banning shame, which is what I had to do to block me from my superior self and my higher consciousness.
Oh, I love
Um,
that. I love that. Home is within us, right? Um,
it is.
wow, wow. Like just thinking about that, home is within us. I say that all the time. Like I say that to people. I say that to friends. I say that to family. I've said it more so recently than I have in the past, but like there is nothing outside of you that is going to make you happy. There's nothing external. I used to think that, right? Like that if I got to a certain point in my life, I could call myself successful, but when I got there, I didn't feel that happiness. When I got a certain car, when I got a certain house, status doesn't matter, right? Like that's all outside of who we are. No happiness was associated with that. It was an illusion. It was like smoke and mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself confused in the past when people would say that to me. Like, there's nothing outside of you that's going to make you happy. It all comes from within. And it was like all the spiritual teachers and the mystics would say that. And I had no clue of what that meant. Like, how do you even go within? How did you find that? Like, how did you go within?
I found it by sitting down and starting with my breath. And it was at the height of the darkness and the shame in my life where this grin and bear it mode, the mode that we praise, that you're talking about, just didn't work anymore. And I had tried everything, everything. I wanted sobriety. I wanted stability. I wanted joy. I wanted so much. And after, I mean, treatment, jail, hospitalizations, I ended up in another treatment center. And it was a small place called Dee's House. And they're the ones that introduced me to trauma therapy and Kundalini yoga. And that was the final layer that was lifted. And the first baby step was literally sitting down on the ground like I am now and just breathing and feeling safe in my body. And the whole aura of the location and the place were people, like you, like us, like others that are searching, that are feeding this higher consciousness and warmth and this like core innocence and love that we all come from. And so I felt safe in the place. I finally felt safe in my body with the breath. And then slowly with the breath, my mind started to calm a little bit, and it just grew from there. It was a journey.
Hmm. What did you
And the
experience?
sound, well, the Kundalini yoga uses a lot of sound. So gongs, bowls, and a lot of mantra. And I needed that. I needed something to replace what was in my head. And, I had tried other yoga, other meditation, 12-step recovery, self-help books, running, marathons, all those other things. But to sit surrounded by people connected to a higher consciousness and wanting it, and then listening to our breath with gong and mantra over and over again, it was like, okay, I started being able to hear phrases like, you are not a body, nor the thoughts your mind makes.
So you heard that, right? Having no context of what that meant.
Well, I had, as we were talking about, a near death experience and heavy duty recovery physically about 20 years prior.
The car
And I
crash, right?
couldn't, correct. Yeah. A big rig hit my car, and my car flipped 3 times and landed upside down in the embankment and out of sight. And I wasn't breathing when they found me, and my brain bled. I had a punctured lung, 22 broken bones. And it was the, it was that experience where I didn't know that I was struggling to make sense of that experience in this body and mind. I didn't quite know. I was trying to merge and understand this truth, and always yearning for it in all the ways you just mentioned, but it wasn't until Kundalini yoga and breaking down the thoughts, breaking down the physical pain, and just being able to sit still, that slowly that the door to the home was opened, and I can get as close to that experience as possible. We can in our bodies, but I see the door that was kind of the initial step of the experience, is where I, in my meditation, envision my father's last hug. And then after that, it's a whole nother kind of experience.
Mm.
So,
Mm. Can you just is there any words that you can use to describe that, right? Like I know it's kind of ineffable, like to a lot of people, they can't really they come back from that space and they can't describe it, with our limited language. But like I'm so curious with
there
that.
is, yeah, there is a mantra, and it is from Kundalini Yoga, and it's called the Mool Mantra. And there's a whole Japji language that's a set of pares that is beautiful. And it literally is one man's, Guru Nanak's, experience of a near death event. And in Kundalini Yoga, when I heard these words, it was the closest thing to describing it. And it's super simple. And it's Ekonkar Satanam Kartapurik Nirbol Nirver Saibang, and it's like Good Prasad Jap, like Waheguru. And those, there's 7 words, and it's ek, like from nothingness and everything, movement, something was created, your true self, without fear, without judgment, formless, timeless. And that's really the closest thing that I ever found to describing it. It's so indescribable and layered, and could be a billion books trying to describe it. But the simplicity of those words is like, it says it all. And that's a mantra that I listen to every morning. And that is in the traditional meditation practice called sadhana.
Hmm.
It's part of the beginning of that practice.
And do you do that every day?
I do meditation every day, and I say that mantra every day. Sadhana is actually like a 4:30 a.m. cold shower, and it's a 2.5 hour thing. And I do teach it. So once a week, I don't do the full one every day, but
So let
it's
me ask you this, right? Like coming from your past, lawyer, very successful, is your heart just on fire right now doing this work, right? Like something totally
yeah.
out of left field. Like I don't think 20 years ago you would have said I would have been a Kundalini yoga instructor or doing, doing these mantras. Like I feel like this is
I was
totally different than what you expected.
I was a strange kid where I always
I was a strange kid.
meaning I always thought like bigger, and I always had, sometimes I wish I hadn't had it because I think it put me in danger, but I always had this like enormous empathy and could always feel other people's or sense other people's pain. And I'm not saying I have some special powers or anything, but it was this like will, and it kept me alive in so many ways and in so many times in my life, to save the world, to help other people. And my parents' background, I do believe, influenced that. My father, Native American, Hispanic, and he overcame a gazillion challenges to end up becoming one of the first Spanish speaking attorneys, and just had this like drive in him to make the community, and he made the world a better place, like through the law. So I saw this belief in hope and love and warmth and justice. And my mom too, she grew up in the war during Germany and helped to sponsor a gazillion Vietnamese refugees. And so, you know, while there wasn't any emotional presence, and no healthy or secure attachment built whatsoever, no life skills, they opened the world just by their ethnicities: tamales, apple strudel, and egg rolls at the holidays. And um and for some reason I was the child. All my siblings are really good people, but I was the child that had this I wanted to work for Amnesty International. I saw like the larger world. And so that, in some way, to answer your question, is connected to this wider belief in a power called love. And you know when my father passed later, after childhood trauma and different things, and being in that grin and bear it mode I'm talking about, things were working in life. I hadn't even, I barely experimented with drugs. Drinking wasn't like a thing, really. I mean, I did with my friends and my roommates, but after my father passed, the physical representation of something beyond us, a person like living it, what is love, what is justice, was gone. And it made no sense to me. There was no warning.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Hmm. Have you been able to connect with him like in those states of altered states of consciousness, like when you're getting into that meditation?
completely. And he was with me very much so, very, very much so, in moments immediately after his death where I would cry on the drives to law school and back and care for my mom. And but I was in such a survival mode, and my mind's fears and all the self-judgments and all of that was really separating me from it, from something beyond what I felt was his presence. And it was sheer survival
Did he ever show you signs?
all the time.
Yeah. Well, like what's a major sign that you know he's around?
There's serendipitous things that happen all the time, and intuition, just like a gut feeling.
Hmm.
It's pretty frequent now because the thoughts are less, the fears are gone, and it allows me to not personalize everything.
Hmm.
It's like he'll give me the intuition behind a interaction with somebody. And I don't know if that's my connection to it, to a higher consciousness, but when it's literal versus when it's like a literal answer, I do believe it's him. When it's just an RX sense or guidance that's not literal, it's that's a different thing. I
Sure.
don't really know what I mean, but
Yeah.
throughout writing the book, yeah, he was fully there.
That's awesome, right? Like to experience that. And I mean, I've had meditations where I've had conversations with my grandfather. And then I've literally brought in things that he's given me. Like, I don't know if you ever practice this, whatever. There's an author named Christina Rasmussen. She has a book out. I think it's Where Have You Gone or Where Are You At or something. I'm terrible. Right? I'm terrible. I can't remember her book name, but she writes about how we can go into meditation and go into we can use techniques to kind of get us into those altered states of consciousness and have conversations with past loved ones, and then they can give us a gift. And when they give us a gift, it can be like my grandfather gave me like a pocket knife, and sure as shit, 3 days later, there's this pocket knife like and somewhere in my reality, right? The same one that he gave me. And it's happened numerous times since. It's not in the literal sense, like someone will walk up to me, and give me something, but it's like for instance, if you like if your father gave you a butterfly or something like that, like it won't be it could be a literal butterfly, but it could also be like a sticker of a butterfly or something. You know what I mean? Something will come into your reality that will like verify that evidence that you need to know that you just had or verify the conversation that you just had with your past loved one. I've done it numerous times, and it's helped me get through some of the tough spots in my life, right? Like to know that we are not these bodies, and that we can interact with past loved ones, and they're not truly gone. I mean, they're just in different forms. They just transform into different. If you, I don't, here I can't say for sure, but they've definitely transitioned to a different space time, maybe space time, maybe different reality. Who knows? But they're definitely communicating with us, and I just find so much peace in that. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Ditto. It's feathers for me.
Feathers. I love that. Feathers.
He was buried
Cardinals too.
with a
Cardinals.
big, yeah, he was buried, or a big plume of eagle's feathers was put on him, and just devastated and not knowing what I was going to do with law school, and my mom just totally incapacitated. And I had finals like a week after his funeral, and he died from a heart attack playing basketball, and it was just like no warning. And when I went to go take my second year first set of exams in law school, they're the hardest. My friends just came up in a line and set a feather on my desk in front of me, and just as a reminder that he was with me, and I was carrying on, his work and his legacy, hopefully. And um, that was the literal representation of him. Yet I felt him. I felt like a calm that whole time, and I passed. Now feathers, they're all over the place, and some people think that they're gross if you find one and pick it up, but they're not gross. I write in the book, and I always share that it's a reminder of, just pause for a second, and what were the journeys of this feather, and how are you like embracing this second and this minute of this journey right now. My sons, when they see one, they pick it up, and they always run up to me. And if that's just kind of one way that I know my father is looking down, and um, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
I have a lot of
absolutely.
feathers.
That's awesome. I saw three cardinals the other day. Oh, nice. Oh, did that hurt? That's like on a sensitive spot right behind the ear, tattoo of feather.
That's the first time I've done that, a podcast. I remember they asked me, I was after recovery, I was a very active and a local elected, and had the honor of representing and freeing this wrongfully convicted kid before I um, had the accident. It was right after my dad passed, and um, I um, went up north, had a whole nother, decade of stuff, terrible things that happened. And when I came back, the Orange County Weekly that had covered the Arthur Carmona case did a beautiful story of recovery. And in it, they had the tattoo, and they're like, well, this person doesn't care about anybody's judgment. If somebody puts a tattoo on their neck, then I guess that means you're not going to run for higher office. And I was like, that was the last thing on my mind, but that was the joke of the tattoo. But this is my twins. This is two. And then there's another one that's on my foot, and that's my oldest son.
That's all. That's beautiful. What is um higher office, right? Like what is your mission now? Like what are you feeling pulled by the universe to do now?
To help people on this road of recovery from trauma and addiction. And there's so many solutions out there, yet people, I believe, like I did, don't know where to start. And we're all seeking this calm, this safety, this clarity, and trying so many different ways. And what I found after trying everything is I had to create a middle ground before a real, not only a spiritual awakening, but spiritual guidance and all the awesome stuff that's over here with spirituality and consciousness. I had to create a middle ground between that and, most of all, my mind and all the thoughts, so that all of this didn't separate me from my true self and truth. And so what I'm finding is people connect with finding a home base to start in.
Mm.
So right now it's teaching Kundalini yoga. It's helping people one-on-one. and it's a lot of live Instagram and things of that sort. There's a lot evolving right now, and people that are giving me feedback about how the book is helping them.
How's that feel?
I mean, gosh, a mom's daughter had a near-death experience, and she gave the book to her daughter after reading it, and that's one. Several people in suicidality in it have reached out. Multiple people, I can go on and on, but it feels that is what I want to do. That is why the answer to your question about how do I feel about sharing the story and it all being out there, my mind's made fears of people's judgments is like it's non-existent, because I know by putting it out there, I can help people see our mind is making this shame and causing this shaming, and we don't have to go there. Let's just say, okay, my mind's in the survival mode. Let's start somewhere in the middle. And I I'm hoping that towards the end of the book, it's getting people to kind of approach all the different ways that they've tried a little bit differently. And the next book will be
Uh-oh. We're
them
already
kind
talking
of
about the
through
next
that
one.
path. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know when that's going. I've written so much. It's just it'll be guided by
That's what I love to hear.
this whole phase.
That's
Yeah,
what I
it
love to
will
hear.
be guided, and it's all in here, and it's so cool because it's a combination of the cell, the the little girl that wanted to help people now in a healthy mode with the higher connection and place that I can go to, and there's no like frazzleness about it. It's just all really organically evolving, and so
Sure. So it is a higher office, essentially.
the right one.
The right one. That's what I'm talking about. And then like, people's judgments, right? Like we're so afraid of that. But ultimately, isn't it like smoke and mirrors, right? Because if we identify with the ego, then yeah, it will affect us. But if we understand that we are not this body, we are not the ego, we are something totally different, right? Then it should not affect you at all, right? Like it's an illusion.
It is an illusion. And again, my hope in the book is for people, when most people hear that, it's hard to understand. I remember when I first heard "You're not a body," "You are not your thoughts" from Miriam Paul, who's in the book. I was almost offended because it was this mind and this body that experienced so much pain and physical and emotional, as well as the mind that got me through it. And when she drew a circle and then a little pie and said, "This is your ego mind," we are born from and in and always have a core innocence, and that this is our true self, and this is what's separating you. It was like, bam,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
really where it all started. Is okay. Then with Kundalini yoga combined with that and connecting more to that space, the real trauma work I could start about a year later.
Hmm. Did you ever experience like one of those Kundalini experiences where I guess the energy is rushing up your spine?
Kundalini rising, yes.
Yeah. I've
Yes.
I'm so interested in that. Like, what does that feel like to you?
Kundalini yoga focuses so much on spinal health. And my experience with it was, again, the closest thing to the near death experience, where I saw there's a physical feeling. It was very similar to what you experienced, what you described. But what I saw was initially my a physical high and faces flashing in front of me that I didn't recognize, but I knew I knew.
Hmm.
And expressions that weren't in words that I knew what they were saying. And just complete and total surrender physically. When I came from that, I knew, I knew that it was my ancestors and future souls helping me understand the merging of past, present, and future. The time isn't linear. And it really, really, really helped me to thank myself, to forgive myself, and it gave me like this excitement, like, wow, whatever I'm going to heal of past generations undone work that I've carried, whatever ways that, my sons can, it really was the motivation of the book, can gain from pain and joy that are both embraced. It was like, I get it. I completely, I get it. I've been carrying all of this undone work.
Self-love, right?
Does that make sense? What I just
Yeah,
described?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because there's some things in there that you said that I want to touch upon, right? Like the self-love aspect of that. Like during your journey prior to any of this work that you've done on yourself, like the healing, did you know what that was? Like self-love? Did you ever experience it before this, right? And are you experiencing that now?
Thank you for asking that. It is what I am experiencing it now, but in living the work today, I apologize if I'm closing my eyes, but
No, I love it. You're connecting with that. I get it.
um living the work today is taking any trigger, and I've learned from my therapist that relationships and life interactions are really opportunities to heal, to lift all these layers that block us from our core truth. And so self-love for me today and over the years of recovery has been, if there's a trigger, it's not I jump into fear or self-judgment. It's sitting down in the space and saying, there's more to heal from this wound. And all of mine were not feeling seen, acknowledged, that whole sense of abandonment. And then that was triggered by the truth in public eye not being seen and acknowledged. And so that's how I give self-love in the most important way for me today. It's like I am committed to that as the primary thing that will keep me sober and that will keep me stable, because it relates to triggers in the past to reach for relief when it would become, I'm living it, I'm like living in the fear, I'm living in the trigger, and then it would literally become, the block. It would attack this connection. And so they're less intense. Definitely today it's not frequent yet. I was in a relationship last year, and that person was very scared, I believe, of the love and the authenticity and the
Scared of your
just
love.
in the most loving way that I can look at it all, their own unchecked mind and fears resulted in viewing my allowing somebody to give me an amends as betrayal. And so I knew immediately that this person wasn't in a good place. And it became kind of this shaming thing, that allowing somebody to give an amends to me, it was a very complicated thing initially to navigate, because I really loved who we were together, just what we brought out in each other. And I had not allowed myself to really feel like full joy and love. It was still this like the love for my children and the love in my own self-care had grown, but to feel that with someone else. And so interestingly, I know why the universe brought that, because it revamped this whole home within, and this, wow, there's another layer of this core wound of like, I know my truth. I know the truth I offered, and I know the love that I am and that I offered. And that had to be the only thing that mattered. It really had to be. And so that's an example of the self-care today,
Hmm.
um, in terms of spirituality, because it was painful.
Sure. It's interesting, like hearing you speak to some of the triggers, right? Like not being seen or heard, right? But ultimately, it's like we're not seeing ourselves. Like we're not seeing who we truly are, going within and finding out who we are. Like that trauma is so painful. Like the shadow is so scary that we don't want to look at it. We don't want to go within. Um,
No.
you
And
know?
yeah, and I think if we don't have like secure and healthy attachment, I know I'm using lingo here that I learned, but we if we don't have that, they say that there's this zone of tolerance when painful things happen, and that we automatically, because we are in bodies with a mind that helps us survive, go into that whole fight, flight, freeze, fawn thing. And that's the cool thing about doing this work and having children is, okay, how am I going to show them what a shadow self is? How am I going to, you know, help them to find words for their feelings so they can even kind of go behind the feeling like we're talking about.
Mhm.
And, so I had no clue about any of that, and had all these, what I call mental intrigues, that just solidified in stone. And, they talk about these, what do they call it? I forget, but they're survival modes and parts,
The parts of us.
the parts that'll pop up and pop up. But behind that is the shadow self. And I see it due to having done trauma work. And I can be gentle and kind and loving to
Hmm.
that part of me. But the mental layer really had to be lifted. And, so I strongly encourage folks to lift the mental survival instinct roles and layers, and pretty fascinating to do that.
It's scary as shit, right? Like, I mean, to think about the shadow and what lies in there from your childhood past, your past, everything that you've done in your 20s that you regret, that every relationship,
It's
every lie
shame.
that you told, right? It's shame. It is shame.
Oh,
And a lot of, societal fucking rules say you got to be this certain person. That's why we don't have words to describe our emotions, because they say don't feel that
right.
it's not right.
Right. And then
And
if you do show it or feel it, then they'll say you're, unstable or unfit. And then, things get worse in the system.
yeah,
I
suck it
call it
up,
in the
buttercup.
book.
Let's go. Right. Like, yeah, no, it's,
There's no healing. There's no like progress. It's, yeah.
and
But the
then
shadow self, I mean, is like the home of shame in so many ways. That would be a
yeah.
whole nother podcast. Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, because you're going in there and you gotta like, that's why people don't do the inner work, is because of that shame. But you
And it's
have to
sad that
love it.
they're
You
afraid.
have, yeah.
Yeah, because this is where the whole home within is so helpful. Because, like, what was that original spark? Like, what causes the beating of our hearts? What was that? I call it a core innocence. Some people don't like that word, but it's like, what was that we come from this wholeness or this spark. And if we remember, like, we're infinite beings, whole, divine, complete, and that our mind will create these thoughts that separate us from that truth, we can sit right here in the middle and not allow that fear or the shame to stop us from just diving in a little bit more. Okay, soul, how did you survive? Ask the soul for answers. Have conversations with your thoughts. Create little baby steps to get closer to understanding your shadow self. It doesn't need to be like this thing right away, like breath, at conversations with your own thoughts. And really, those are baby steps, and it gets less and less scary
I
to
think
really
that's so smart, right? Like to objectify your thoughts, like because you're not your thoughts, but to like look at them as objectively as possible and say, like, where did that come from? Right? Like,
who cares if someone says, you're talking to yourself and you're
yeah.
whatever. You do it with you, and I do it in the book. you know um I there's parts in the book where I'm talking to little Nadia, or where I wrote it in that form, but I was really speaking to myself. And if you can't do it with the like objectifying the thoughts, do it if you are a parent as though you are speaking to your child, or the inner child in you. Come out wherever you are.
Mhm.
you know,
I find that very healing for me. Like when I can speak to that inner Trey, that little child of that is Trey. Um,
that's the self-care.
yeah, when I can speak to him and just, I look at him and I say, it's okay, buddy. Like it's okay. Like you can stop trying to be the strong one. Like I got you. Like we're here together, and there's so much healing that comes behind that. But like every part of your journey, like every part, like even the parts that you're ashamed of, like the Trey that was going out and drinking beers all the time, like all weekend, right? Like, and living a life that was very shallow and spending all my paycheck on dumb shit, right? Like when I was early 20s, and like not being ashamed of that, but like looking at that Trey from a different perspective of like, what was it that you weren't getting? It definitely wasn't self-love. It wasn't, I wasn't looking at myself. I was in pain, right? Like I had gone through a couple breakups, and I was running from that pain, and I didn't want to I didn't want to look at my shit. I didn't want to look at the shadow. I didn't want to look at anything internally. So I was running the entire time, and I was numbing myself.
It's that survival mode.
Yeah. And
Survival.
so when we can just look at that individual that's still here with us all the time, and just give it a hug, give it a kiss, give it a note of love, and you are worthy, right? Like I imagine when you were writing this book, you had similar experiences with healing. I mean, just going back and remembering some of those situations, and releasing some of that emotion in the body. I mean, it had to be freeing.
It was amazing, and a process, and the way that I protected the inner child was, these thoughts are attacking your connection to your truth and innocence. It was like the word character defect in 12-step recovery can be used, and it could be there. But what worked for me was, this is a survival mode. Wow, you were surviving.
Mm.
Now the shame and the fear, okay, I understand it now. Let's not let this convince you that anything that is infinite has changed. And just keep going back to that truth, that one truth that never changes. It never changes. We're infinite beings, whole, divine, complete. And we just happen to be in this body and this mind for now.
I love it. I could talk to you all night. Seriously. How can they buy the book? Where can they connect with you?
It's available wherever books are sold. It's a little strange to walk into your local Barnes and Noble where you took your oldest son to play trains and see it on the biography shelf. but it's on Amazon, IndieBound, everywhere. But you can go to www.nadia-davis.com and all the links are there. There's also links to yoga and other things, other events and things going on, and a newsletter. My Instagram is at Nadia Maria Davis. There's all kinds of spontaneous check-ins and readings, and Fridays is what I call spiritual advocacy, which is a, a term that came about advocating
Mhm.
from the advocate in me for your spirit. And that when we do that, we can have the self-care. We can see when other people are in their own fears and judgments and protect and respond with compassion. And I am hoping that all of this and the work that you're doing will lead to more transformative justice and systems, more compassionate justice for people struggling with mental health and addiction. It's got to happen.
Mm. Me too, Nadia. Thank you so much for taking the time to join and have this conversation with me. I love sharing this space with you, and it's been amazing.
Thank you for providing it. I've really, really enjoyed it.